that's me. Yeah, hi, my name is Fee, and I guess similar actually to Leah earlier, like just ask questions as we go. Yeah, if there's anything I'm not mentioning or that is actually of more interest, please just put out your hand and we can have a conversation on the way. Yes, my name is Fee, and I run an organisation called MakeWorks. I guess the background to that project, really was my final year project when I was studying product design at the art school in Glasgow. So I guess I was just going to speak generally about how my interests of working in furniture design and making and very much physical being in a workshop, I guess links to my other life of making things with data and databases and open access to information. Which is kind of where the MakeWorks project very much exists, right between these two things. And it's very much about other people getting involved, again, in both those things and how they kind of interrelate. So this is the website, make.works. And what MakeWorks is an open database of makers, manufacturers, and workshops across Scotland. And now actually there's kind of chapters across the world starting up, but I still focus on just Scotland. And that really came from my own kind of feeling as a designer of I want to know where to get things made, I want to find a workshop, I do not want to order 100,000 components from the other side of the world and have them shipped in massive container ships, which cost loads on shipping, but also is really destructive to our environment. That really was where it was coming from, was just wanting to feel more empowered as a designer to be able to make things in small batch quantities and locally, and I guess change our manufacturing system to be a more positive one for the environment. But the reality of that means being in industrial states. I guess one of the big things I realized when I started researching this project was just like Googling, this was maybe 8-9 years ago, but trying to find factory websites, like the websites for manufacturers is awful, like really awful, like outdated kind of 90s, like old school GIFs, you know, like rotating like sound effects in the background and really jargon heavy. So people talking about like, lots of different like chemical science kind of information if you want to do acid etching, and actually if you're a jeweler all you need to know is what size, what shape, and what does it look like at the end of the day. Like it's really the kind of language that industry were using was really difficult to access from a creative perspective. So I guess a lot of what we do in terms of collecting data is then translating that into something that's useful and can be understood by a much wider audience than someone that already has worked within the manufacturing industry for 20 years. It's kind of making it much more open and much more easy to understand by other people. And I really started this project by physically getting, I can't even drive, so actually was getting on little trains to like the outskirts of the industrial estates in Cambuslang and, you know, knocking on the doors of these places and saying like, what's actually inside here and what does it look like and how can I come and access it and make things with you and what do I need to know or what kind of drawings do I need, and trying to really break down that process of making things. So yeah, it kind of started looking a bit like this. So this is me and Vanna, who we were both studying together, kind of tumbled out of the art school with a plan to make this big open access directory, and then all of a sudden it was a case of, okay, we've really got to go and make that directory, but that data did not exist at that time at all. So we go out and we speak to lots of the factory owners, gather information about, you know, who they are, what they do, how long they've been running, what machines they have, what processes they, you know, do, how to work with them. Do they work with students? Do they only work with the general public? Like, do you need to have certain size of drawings? Like all that information is kind of gathered. We also take a lot of photography and do 90-second film clips so that, again, people can actually understand quite straightforwardly what someone does. And we did a big trip around Scotland where we visited kind of 90 manufacturers in 3 months from the kind of first round of it, and now we continue to do that. So last week I was out for a week we still go out and physically visit all these places to kind of gather that data. Lots and lots of chats in factories. And a lot of gathering information from things like this, like the actual signs at the front of industrial estates. I think that's, people talk about, oh, where does the data currently exist? And it's like, to be honest, like it's really analog and it really needs to kind of connect. Like it's not this mysterious spreadsheet that exists somewhere in the ether. Like it's practical, real stuff, and then how that is translated and put into a workable format for other people to use. And that's what's important. This is us on the 3 months in a camper van. That was our how we actually went to get this stuff. And yeah, a lot of it as well was really pulling out. So a lot of designers and architects would have these little Rolodexes or like black books of contacts, and it's really about, I guess, one of the big challenges that we found At the beginning, I think the fashion designers were the worst for it, but they would not tell you who their seamstresses were. You know, there's about 6 or 7 really good kind of cut-sew small shops to get your stuff kind of made for your first few collections. But people get really scared about, oh, I can't tell you who it is because then they get really busy and they can't do me. And it is this culture thing. And actually, a lot of the work I think we've ended up doing is by having a big open database that people kind of can use and get a benefit from. So when they're looking for where to get my labels or where to make that plinth or those kind of practical things, they then feed back the information about, oh, and I found this guy and he was great. Or, like, you know, if you want to find a stonemason, this person was really brilliant. And so it is just kind of trying to change that culture in the design community at the start to kind of open up and share their contact books so that other people could know where to go. And this is the site, so the kind of, yeah, there's lots of ways to browse it. And that's been going now since 2013 we launched. And again, so that really was made for a very practical sense of being able to browse, match, and then contact these places directly. And that was, I guess, from the initial research I'd done, that was the purpose of this data set, was to help artists, designers, and then moving forward to kind of more general public to be able to access production. But then, I guess, as a creative or designer, like, that's great, and it still works, and is still working. But it was kind of looking for other things I could do, I guess, because we'd built this thing, and then it goes into just maintaining it, and how do you kind of keep your creative brain going, I guess. And I guess I was thinking a lot about the internet. So I grew up as the internet was starting, or the web was starting, and I totally love the internet. I really do. I really can't. I'm not on any social media, but I love the notion and the idea of the internet itself and the origins of that and the connections that exist around that and what could be possible with it. And I guess in the process of making Wakeworks, like, it took me a while to understand what sort of a web organization we were, which is very much a non-profit, open access organization. I did fall into the pitfalls, I guess, of the quite commercial startup world, and very quickly ended up being like, actually, this is not for me. I can't make the things I want to make in this space. And so I guess I'm also very concerned about the health of the internet, and as an organization, what kind of data we collect, both about people that we're then sharing, like openly sharing information about manufacturers with, but equally, we actively don't track very much on the website use itself, just out of respect for people's privacy. So I think there's a lot of kind of quite key decisions you need to make when you're making any digital tool, just bearing in mind, keeping the internet a healthy place and a positive place, and kind of keeping in mind net neutrality and all these things, and being aware of it, and kind of building an ethical, open, healthy resource. Paolo Antonelli, who's director of design at MoMA, talks about the internet as one of the most radical social design experiments, and that's very much in the ethos of the organization of what we try and do. And this is Tim Berners-Lee, who created the World Wide Web. When he created that, the usable format that we use the internet in, he said this is for everyone, and very much gave it away and shared it, and that was kind of really core to what he did, and we wouldn't have digital or the web as it is today if he hadn't shared it and been that open. So again, that's just something that I always come back to, about encouraging people to share information and help others, because it's very much, it helps a kind of wider societal change or shift by being open and sharing. Just a bit of reality about what that looks like in factories. So a lot of people talk about digital manufacturing and laser cutting and 3D printing, and it's all in a very easy system, and actually a lot of the time that means taking an email and printing it off and putting it on a floppy disk to get on the loom. Like, it's quite analog still, and that's kind of something to keep in mind. And also people that we work with. This is Senga, again, brilliant cut-sew manufacturer. She doesn't have an email address, which, when I shared her film and her listing with her, has anyone got any water? Sorry. We had to send it to her daughter's Hotmail that was like Miss Crazy 64 or something. Like, it was a really nuts address. So I think I'm always reading, this is a very human project, and it's about engaging people from all walks of life. Perfect, thank you. That's so much better. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind with any of these projects, is it's about people that maybe aren't online or don't see the point of the internet a lot of the time, and actually how do you involve all those people? Anyway, and then also I guess from my side of things, so I studied product design, it was product service system, it's a bigger picture. I can't code, I'm learning how to do it now, but it was all about collaborating with web developers and kind of learning as I went. Like everything we've done with the database has been very much a learning as I go process and working out how does this work for what I want to make. It's never been about how do I guess I was very lucky that I worked with people that really understood the potential of having a well-structured database at the beginning. But it wasn't actually what I was thinking about. When I was building the website, it was about, will this be easy to use for someone to contact a manufacturer? Not have we structured this database to be usable for other things later in the line, which we now are doing, but it wasn't what I thought of at the beginning. The other thing that I guess we did, maybe not intentionally at the beginning, but naturally just licensed everything under quite a public Creative Commons license. That was just the gut feeling. I felt that was the right thing to do. Really glad I did do that because it meant that everyone we visited on that first trip kind of signed off of like, licensing it publicly. But it's just, I think, as a route in to understanding licenses and how to do that, it was a really, especially because we do film and photography and the database, it was quite a straightforward thing. And I guess started my own exploration into understanding people like Aaron Schwartz and the kind of free culture movement and what that meant for the project. So yeah, I think people do know about it, but if it's a good reference point for learning about a lot of this stuff. And then, yeah, I guess it was a few years in, I was, I guess, looking at the database and just, well, I say looking at the database, looking at all these listings of the website, and actually realized I don't understand how we've structured our own database, and I'm running this organization. So teamed up with another couple designer developers, and they really helped me kind of go back and actually understand what is the structure of your data, what does that look like, how is it connected. And these are all of our taxonomies. So we've got processes, products, machines, materials, and they're all in this kind of tree structure that are then attached to the companies that have those things. So it does, we do have like every single laser cutter in the country and like which companies have it and where, that is all in there. But just for me to understand what that might look like. And then I guess the next step was to make an API. Which again is open and public, and anyone that's a developer, please go and use it. Sorry, my throat's bad today. Yes, we kind of made an API, which I'm still kind of learning how to use, but my developers are great and kind of allow us to make things with it. And the first thing we kind of did was actually work out how can we use this to make other ways of browsing the site quite straightforwardly. Like I was finding that as we added more and more companies, it started to feel quite clunky in our original design. So like what are fast things that we could do to make that easier? So things like actually just having all the different taxonomy terms and then exactly where they're linked to as a quite quick internal tool that we use. These are all prototypes. We kind of did a series of experiments using the API just to see what we could make and what it might look like. And it was kind of fine when it was just, again, using our API to do our own thing. But then when it got really exciting was when we started connecting our data set to other data sets and started connecting them up. And that's where I think that was the moment where I was like, oh my goodness, data is so amazing. Like, you can just do loads of cool shit with it. So yeah, this was one example. So we scraped the archive from the National Museums of Scotland, which actually have a pretty decent kind of information about objects in their collection, and then connected that with our database. So for example, this is a rug, there was tapestry that was been woven, so we can tell how that object has been made, and then here's places in Scotland that actually you could go to do a similar thing now, so actually connecting those two things together. And so doing that a few different ways, so different materials, this is objects that are made in clay, and then places in Scotland that you could go and do that now. So lots of those sort of experiments. And yeah, I guess I find that quite exciting, and it's just like, what other institutions could we work with to kind of look at those sort of things, or is there other projects in that space? And then I showed this to someone at the RCA that I was working with. And she was looking at redistributed manufacturing and then data within, I guess, like local production systems, and kind of going back to that, how do we change manufacturing for the better? And so then we were commissioned to do a project looking at that and what we could do with our data sets, with other data sets that would help in a kind of wider picture of changing production. And so we made an extension project. So if, yeah, extension.make.works. Where essentially we started looking at pulling in lots and lots of other data streams in relation to our data and to other things. I guess we thought of it as, how do we take the MakeWorks database out to the wider web, which extensions are a really great kind of thing to be able to do that with. So we took the MakeWorks database and we made an extension, just picked IKEA as a quite useful product catalogue to be like, okay, what would it be like if actually you were looking at objects on the IKEA website and it would say, hey, guess what, you can make this yourself locally, or here's how you could get this object repaired, or here's where you could get a second-hand object. Like actually really taking, I guess, being quite empowered about being like, actually, if I'm not super on board with wanting mass manufactured products, how do I kind of quite quickly and accessibly make that change and are able to make that decision myself? So yeah, it works by, yeah, you have an IKEA chair, we take the object, the kind of colour, the materials, and then correlate that with the MakeWorks database, but also other data streams that we've kind of pulled together in this extension. So I think this should play. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, it shows you kind of other open designs that you could kind of use as an alternative, but also there's loads of resources and a lot of the research that we kind of did about the context of redistributed manufacture and different kind of ways of producing that are in there. So it was really fun, but also it was a real moment where I was like, this is like a really, like it makes you feel kind of excited about the internet again, because I got to the point of being like very frustrated with the like super commercial startup community, very frustrated with my personal data or not feeling in control of my own privacy online. And I guess that contrast with them being like, but if you learn how to use data yourself and you learn how to build things and learn how to understand it and be more literate in that whole context, you can make really cool things with it again. And it just was a really kind of getting back to the playfulness and the fun and the kind of making things that you felt like could actually make a difference or could be changed. Like I would love to do this with Amazon, or like looking at any Internet of Things products and actually saying, well, actually, if we made the electronics ourselves, then we can like not have everything on Alexa going to, you know, Amazon's massive data mining thing. So yeah, those things I guess have been quite exciting. And we presented it at Mozilla Festival, and I also took part in the Mozilla Open Leadership course, which is another really brilliant kind of free online leadership course that you can take. They do it twice a year. I really recommend it if anyone's got an open project they're wanting to do. And I guess the other thing I'd kind of comment on though is that through this whole process, I really wanted to go and learn more about data and open data, and where do I go to learn these things, and how can I apply it to what I'm trying to work on. And in Scotland, I really struggled to find somewhere, unless I went back and did another degree, I really, really struggled. And I guess the only place I could find in the UK that was doing the kind of course I was looking for was the Open Data Institute in London. I didn't really want to have to go and spend a week in London and spend, you know, thousands of pounds on that course. So I ended up actually scraping through they've got a Train the Trainer ODI course, and like scraping through all the kind of past participants. I found a handful that had studied it, like kind of done that course, but I knew were kind of in the community in Scotland. And so now I have like a open data mentor tutor. Comes a bit like you'd get a maths tutor at school. Like he comes to my office like once a month, and we do kind of 2-3 hours of like I guess combination of myself understanding where to get other data sets and what I can do with them, but also that's naturally getting me into being like, okay, I want to be able to code myself so I can start making things, and so I'm not having to spend all my time writing funding applications to pay web developers. That's the crux. So I guess that's another, I guess a comment. There's been a few discussions today about like education around this stuff in Scotland, and I guess I was quite determined on what kind of thing I wanted, so I went and found that tutor, but I don't know that everyone would do that. So there's definitely an opportunity, I think, to run those kind of workshops and classes. And the other thing is that, so now MakeWorks, so yeah, as I said, I guess over the years people have approached us saying they want to run the project in different cities and also different parts of the world. So there's a Birmingham one, there's Derby, who are actually run by the Museum of Derby, and they're now redoing their archive for the museum based on the MakeWorks database structure, so it all links, so they can do lots of these kind of interesting projects, which is really exciting. Also, yeah, the UAE, Sweden, there's different places starting basically, which means that we're now in a position of kind of putting in best practice for those people collecting the data and what they then do, and also having the conversations with factories about where that might be, or what that's used for and how that's used. So it kind of does have an effect kind of longer term, or in terms of how you train others to be collecting that information. And the other thing, I guess, as part of my tutoring, one thing that we've been looking at a lot is actually how do I structure the MakeWorks database to be, this is the 5-star data strategy that, again, going back to Tim Berners-Lee, talks about a lot in terms of organizations having a really good structure. And actually I feel like we went straight to the connected API right at the end, but actually we skipped all this other stuff in between, so like it's a website. But most people, if they wanted to have a download of the MakeWorks database, probably would find it more satisfying in a spreadsheet or as a series of PDFs. So I guess part of me is like backtracking of what is the most useful format to be able to share it in, and not just always going straight to the kind of most web literate solution, and kind of taking into account all those different levels. Yeah, I guess that's something that we're just kind of always keeping in mind and is kind of interesting as an organisation. And yeah, that's it. Questions?